Tungia Mata's finance bill. Now we have FCPA Robert Waruiru, who is also a member of ISPAC, and he'll be speaking to us about exactly what this finance bill means for businesses. We did the green flags, red flags for personal finance last week. Let's go business-wide now. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning, Mariam.
It's good to have you. Kamal Kawaida.
Thank you very much.
Back.
Thank you.
As always, we start the day with a quote, and Philaris will share the quote of the day with you. You can say if you agree, disagree, if it speaks to you or not.
Okay. Today's quote is actually courtesy of a very influential economist. That's John Keynes. And he was very instrumental, especially around the Great Depression. So he's one of those people that changed governments on how they think about recessions, public spending, taxes, unemployment, and economic crisis. So the quote reads, "The difficulty lies not so much in developing new ideas as in escaping from old ones." How does that speak to you?
Wow, escaping from old ones. And I think that really calls for innovation. Really, that's what he's talking about. And I think, the way they say that there's nothing new under the sun. So really, can you innovate? And I think that is an apt quote for today, because as a country, we really need to think about how to innovate ourselves out of the current situation that we find ourselves in. So I think that's a very apt quote.
I like that you introduced the word innovation. And we have to innovate. We can't keep using the same models and being lazy in our thinking in terms of how we're going to raise revenue, because Kerry has a very ambitious target. So the revenue target for this financial year that is coming is 3.63 trillion. How this is going to be met is why we are here discussing this with you. So a good place to start would be what you gave comments on Mariam's explanation of what is zero-rated tax and what tax-exempt status looks like. And the front page of the Daily Nation has a number of things here that directly affect Kenyans. The conversation, yes, we are looking at the business impact, but it's good that we start from here. So this is, of course, going to bite on family incomes. And the number of zero-rated to tax-exempt status items here is cane, feeds, medicine, phones, transportation. What are your thoughts on this? What can Kenyans expect if this bill passes as it is?
Well, if this bill passes as it is, Wamboi, is that Kenyans must expect, and we must expect, that there's going to be a price increase. And the reason why there's that price increase, and I like what Mariam said earlier on, is when you've got a zero-rated product, the costs that you incur to manufacture that product. And a good example is if you're transporting, say, goods from Mombasa. And a fantastic example is LPG, cooking gas. Cooking gas is currently zero-rated. So if once it lands in Mombasa and I need to transport it to Nairobi so that I can sell it in Nairobi, I'll incur transport cost. And that transport cost has got a VAT. If it's zero-rated, then I can claim that back from government, which means I don't have to pass it or build it into the cost of the product. However, if it's VAT exempt, then I cannot claim it and I have to factor it into the price of the product. And the same thing goes for electricity and rent and so on. So this is the reason why when you say an item is VAT zero-rated, it is slightly cheaper than a VAT-exempt good. Now, if you look at the list of items that have been proposed to be exempted from VAT, they're actually moving from zero-rated to exempt. Yeah. That means that they will be slightly more expensive. Animal foods, pharmaceutical products, transportation of sugarcane, and so on, electric bicycles, electric buses, and so on. So it essentially means that there's going to be a little bit of an increase in the pricing. However, having said that, I think it's important to step back. VAT was introduced into this country in 1990. And when it was introduced, the list of zero-rated and exempt products was very little. But by the time we were changing it in 2013, that list had grown to about 490 items. Okay. Yeah? Oh. And that's because everybody's asking for VAT zero rating and so on. When VAT 2013 came in, it reduced that list to about 70. Okay. But now again, we've grown. I think we are now at about 170 something. So we continue expanding these things. And I think if you look at government's position, there's a sense in what they are saying, because the tax forgone in this country is about, 2023 statistics, we don't have 2024, is about 510 billion shillings. That's half of our deficit. And of that, 306 billion is VAT. The VAT exemption. Wow. So you can see why government is trying to push back and saying, we really don't have headroom here, guys.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's, sorry, Mariam.
No.
it's to any Kenyan who's listening to this, they would ideally say the justification from government makes sense from your explanation, but to an ordinary Kenyan who feels like they've had to absorb so much tax on their day-to-day life, then that justification doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense at all. We've seen institutions like ISPAC push back and say that this should not happen because what you're ideally doing is straining Kenyans further, and that there's barely any disposable income for houses. So is this part of what we are challenging in this bill?
Absolutely. And I think there are many facets of this bill that we are challenging. And we must start with the elephant in the room, which is our expenditure. If we reduce our expenditure, then the taxes that we are collecting can possibly help us finance our expenditure. If you look at this finance bill, the reason why people are also pushing back is that these taxpayers or Kenyans feel that they have been taxed too much, whether you're talking about POI, it's at 35%, whether you're talking about VAT on these things, which is increasing, whether you're talking about corporation tax and so on. So people feel that we are being taxed too much, but we cannot actually see the value of our taxes. If you drive around this country, yes, they are doing roads, but there are so many other roads which have got potholes. There are so many that need to be done. If you go to hospitals, there are no medicines. Generally, the service to the mwananchi is lacking. And that's the problem that we're having, guys, because people say, I want to pay taxes, but I can't see the value of those taxes to me as a person. Mm-hmm. And so why should I even pay taxes? Right. And that brings in the question of tax morale. Why should I even pay the taxes?
Mm-hmm. Walk me through. So I'm trying to understand government's thinking here, and we'll go over the bill's impact on businesses a bit deeper. But just from what you said, 500 billion shilling deficit, we forgo 306 in VAT from this zero-rated goods, right? You know how economies work. Realistically, is government likely to collect this 306 billion shillings? Or even a fraction of it from now moving cane, feeds, medicine, phones, and transport from zero-rated to exempt?
So the thinking here is this: if we move it from zero-rated to exempt, we don't have to refund you because you cannot claim.
Yes.
And so as a government, we are not going to spend that. Mm-hmm. I think we're probably looking at it from the wrong way, because if we reduced some of these tax rates and spurred demand, we can actually increase consumption, which means that we can collect more VAT, more excess duty, and so on. So we probably need to look for that balance where we introduce taxes and reduce others so that we can spur demand, and with more demand, then we can collect more. So to your question, Mariam, whether we can collect it, I don't think we'll ever collect it. Mm-hmm. It's a question of what is the trade-off, because we also have to support our shall I say, marginalized people, or the people who are the lower segment of society. Mm-hmm. Because if we increase the prices of these products, the Kadogo economy especially will be seriously impacted.
It will. From your calculations, what do you expect to be, and the increase in prices? So let's talk about in percentages, whether it's animal feeds, whether it's sugarcane products, whether it's pharmaceuticals. Is it an immediate 16%? Because that's what you think when you think VAT. Is it less? Is it slightly more? Yeah, how does that work?
Well, I don't have the exact numbers, but we've done some simulations for mobile phones, and I know we'll be talking about mobile phones.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. By moving them from zero to exempt, the price increase for imported phones is going to be about 11%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Massive. Okay, the fact that that's already 11% on one, and I doubt it will be any different for any of these other things. But let's stay away from now zero-rated to exempt to just looking at the finance bill as a whole. Walk me through from a business perspective. I like to say red and green flags of this finance bill. Let's start with red.
Well, I think red is what we've been discussing, which is a lot of goods moving from zero rate to exempt, which means basically the prices of these goods will go up. Probably another serious red flag is a provision, a very little provision that a lot of us have not been really talking about, which is Section 4214E of the Tax Procedures Act. And that basically means if you have a problem with Revenue Authority and they assess you, they can't come and collect before you even appeal. And the challenge that we're having with this provision is, why are you enforcing collection before I finish my lines of appeal?
Appeals process.
Yes. And perhaps it's okay to do that. Perhaps it's okay. However, will you refund me my money if I win?
No.
You see, that's a challenge.
No.
Because we already know that we have a refund challenge in this country.
Yeah.
And so that's a big challenge. Of course, we
And I
know.
wouldn't even say there's any world where it's okay that you collect before we have exhausted all appeals. It's enforcement before anything else, which speaks to just a very aggressive taxman, as opposed to boosting compliance and it's just aggressive. So you collect before we have exhausted all appeals to figure out whether or not I do owe you money. I think that's madness. It's absolute madness.
But to also be fair, because you said in this world, I agree. From a Kenyan perspective, we really don't want that provision. But if you go to Tanzania, for example, you have to pay 1/3 before you appeal. So it's what government is saying is that guys, we're not living in an island. We can see people around the region who are doing this. Uganda, the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's
I've seen the game of foot. Nimeona mbali. With this, as it goes through Parliament, there'll be amendments made to now say during the appeals process you need to have paid some of whatever it is that is the disputed amount, right, that you owe them.
That's correct. However, the key thing, and we've been discussing with the parliamentarians about this thing, this is the 4th time this proposal is coming, and every time it has come, it has been rejected. So why you bring it?
4th time in how many years?
4 years.
So every year it finds a way of coming back.
It finds a way of coming back.
It's what do you call it? A smoke screen. Yeah, it's a smoke screen that gets people angry. Then it gets dropped from the bill, and then you're like, Gavana to Skiza. If they were really listening, it wouldn't make its way back for the 4th year in a row.
I would actually, and maybe towards the end of the show, my question would be, how do we create trust between institutions like the Kenya Revenue, their rebranding from authority to services, and the citizens of this country, so that, one, we can be tax compliant and we don't have to play this prefect, principal and student role where enforcement almost feels like, we have to put such big threats on you for you to come and declare your taxes. Like there's something we're not addressing there. It is... there's a lot that could be done. There's no situation where maybe I've seen... If service delivery was a good thing in this country, if things were working, if systems were running properly, then Kenyans probably wouldn't have an issue with paying taxes and being compliant. Now, jumping on to the breakdown of the impact of this finance bill on small, medium, large enterprises and investors. That's how I'd want us to look at it and categorize it. So that way, anyone who's playing within those spaces is able to know. So starting off with the small businesses, we have direct impact on Mama Mboga, who politicians really love to use. We have the boda bodas, we have mitumba traders, we have kiosks, we have hawkers, and we have small retailers. What is the direct impact of this finance bill to these people? Now, we've heard on the VAT on mobile phones, which is something that would directly affect them. We have the VAT on money transfer, which organizations would then pass on to the consumers. What else is detailed in this finance bill that is going to affect the small businesses?
Well, I think one good thing, and we must commend the government for this, is the amnesty. Because you see, for example, when you're filing your 2025 tax returns, you've got to include all your e-Teams invoices. And now they have permitted that we can actually include all invoices and then they'll validate, which is a good thing. So what government is saying is, look, we understand that it's been a very hectic period of filing tax returns over the last 5 years. So if you have any tax liability, we're giving you an opportunity to come forward, pay the principal tax, and then we'll forgive you your penalties and interest. And I think that's a good one because we, to your point, Wamboi, we need to encourage people to pay taxes so that we hopefully can collect more taxes and can bring this down. So I think that's a good one. Another good one, which I think we're not talking too much about it, is the attempt to expand the tax base, getting more people to pay taxes. And actually, I was in a session 2 weeks ago where KRA said we have collected 8 billion from an additional 98,000 Kenyans who previously had never paid taxes.
And these are people who are in the informal sector.
Yes, especially the lower sector, the lower segments of our economy. These are people who are paying 2,000 shillings, 5,000, 10,000 shillings, but they had never paid the taxes before. And so for me, I think that's a very good thing because last time we were here, Mariam, we were talking about the number of people who are registered for tax. 22.3 million taxpayers.
Yes.
But only 7 million are filing and paying
Filing their
taxes.
returns, yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
And how many of those are nil returns?
We don't even know,
Yeah.
but and so the care
I
is
can assure you it's at least half.
Yeah.
Promise. Promise.
yeah. So I think that is also a good attempt by government of sharing this tax burden equitably. But when you look at this finance bill, I think a lot of it seems to be impacting the common mwananchi. In fact, I've just seen a story in Tanzania where Kio has written to the government the government of Tanzania saying, guys, you want to reintroduce an excess duty on imported glass. How Kenya has got a deficit of about 60,000 tons of glass every year. So we import into this country. So if you introduce excess duty, what does that mean for consumers, for packaging, for manufacturing in this country? So there's a lot of things that have been proposed in this bill, and we understand that that's an error, by the way, in the finance bill.
Okay.
Yeah, we actually understand that that's an error. So Wambui...
What type of error? Like a typo?
Yes, it was meant to be an exemption, not an introduction. Yes, so we are waiting to see that.
Okay.
But I think there's one thing that we are all looking forward to, and this is the promised PAYE relief.
Okay.
Yeah. And the reason why I'm saying this is because it's also going to deal with the lower segment of our society in terms of income. The president, the CS have said that they are looking at this, and then they said, well, we think we've got a hole of about 35 or so billion. Now, Kenya Bank Association has done a fantastic job, and they have simulated, if you reduce the PAYE rates by 5%, you're going to release into the economy 28.1 billion shillings. Once you release 28.1 billion shillings, what's going to happen is that we are all going to borrow, we are all going to start small businesses, we are all going to employ people, and that is going to inject 31.2 billion in year one. Yeah? So you're foregoing 28, but injecting 31 billion. And then into the future, you're going to have a sustained injection into the economy from increased consumption.
Yeah.
You're talking about 36,000 new jobs being created. I think they make a very compelling case for the inclusion of those rates or the reduction of PAYE rates in this finance bill because it's not there.
Yeah.
You also talked about Mitumba. Now, and this is the tricky thing, Wamboi, yeah? The white copy that we all saw had that provisions for Mitumba. The green copy, which is the official one, doesn't have.
Okay.
Yeah?
So what mchezo is that?
What I had the CS say is that the association actually requested to pay this tax, and it's a fair point if they did, because we want to increase the tax base. But I actually think it's a good idea because the more people pay taxes, then hopefully the less we can pay in terms of all of us. Yeah, but the problem, and I think...
Sorry, I didn't understand that last part.
So the more people pay taxes, then...
The less we have to pay collectively.
All of us, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, our tax rates will come down. And the medium-term revenue strategy actually says that, for example, corporation tax is supposed to come down to 28%, VAT to 14%. Those are the things that we should be pushing for, so that we can get relief. Because if VAT goes down to 14%, then we are better off in terms of consumption. And there's a point that Wamboi made about that tax morale. 2004 is the last year that Kenya had a budget surplus, meaning we collected more taxes than we required to spend.
What did we do right that year?
It is, I think part of it is the morale, because Kenyans came forward. Of course, there was an amnesty, but Kenyans also came forward and said, we want to build this economy. There was a sense of hope, a renewed hope, renaissance, if you could call it that, where Kenyans are saying, this is our country, let us pay taxes, let us build it. And you could see free primary education during the Kibaki's era. There was a lot of road construction and so on. A lot of businesses going. That's when you went to the streets and you saw banks giving loans because government didn't need to borrow.
Correct.
Yeah, because people have to pay the taxes.
Yeah.
That, I think, is where we need to go. Yeah.
That's where we need to go back. So I'm happy that you've touched on e-teams compliance, because this is something, again, if you're expecting your mama mbogas, again, everybody played within the small business space. How is the Revenue Authority educating people in that space before you come and do enforcement? because you really cannot enforce on people who you've not educated, you've not taught them how these systems work, and then you're expecting to collect from them, and if they don't file their returns, then it becomes an issue. So I'm seeing a very big gap. The thing is, even as we're discussing that we need to raise revenue from these informal businesses, what the authority has to do on its part is educate these people. Before you come and start cracking the whip, educate those people.
Absolutely.
It's only fair.
Absolutely. And the example we really must emulate is Nigeria. When they introduced e-teams, they said, guys, let us use a phased approach because we can't go for the entire country. Let us start with the big guys who can probably afford these systems, implement it. Let's learn from the mistakes of these big guys, and then we can roll it out. I think the challenge that we had in Kenya is that we implemented it for everybody on 1st January 2024.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't enough capacity, there wasn't enough training, as you say. And so we find ourselves in a scenario where we're now filing for 2025. Yeah. We're being asked to support our expenses with e-teams because that is the law. Yeah. But then we can't because none of us have got those e-teams receipts. Yeah. And of course, I'm not going to pay tax on my gross income because I did incur costs. Yeah. So I agree. There's a lot of work to be done in terms of sensitizing. Some of the solutions that have been proposed by KRA, fantastic. But I just don't know how, when you go to the farmer to buy avocados, how are you going to get him to issue an invoice?
I was going to say that, that's the thing about needing every expense to be backed by an e-teams invoice. It's just unrealistic, considering we exist in a very kadogo economy. So that's exactly it. You go to the market, you buy lunch at the kibanda. Are you asking for an e-teams invoice there?
Well, you should, because that's the law. And the solution by Revenue Authority is, okay, fine. So the farmer will not issue the invoice. Let the person who is buying issue their invoice on their behalf, with what we call reverse invoicing. Fantastic. But then what the farmer does is, when you prompt me on my phone, I simply ignore the prompt.
And then am I adding also a tax liability to this farmer or to this mama mboga?
Well, yes, there will be a tax liability to the extent that they are making a profit. At the end of the day, if you're running a business that is making a profit, then pay the tax.
Let's take a short break because we need to be realistic about that. We need to be very realistic about that. Hashtag is Fixing the Nation NTV. Start getting your e-teams invoices ready. No, anyway, jokes aside. We'll be back with FCPA Robert Waruiru on this finance bill and what it means for businesses. We'll be back.
Good morning, Fixers. These are the streets of Tallinn, the capital city of Estonia. How do you say good morning in Estonian? Tere amicus. Let me say again, tere amicus. Now, did you know that Estonia is one of the most digitized countries in the world? Digitized, we mean that almost 100% of all their services in the public and private sector are online. So what you have is you get a digital ID, which you use to transact with government, if you want to register a business, if you want to register for birth, for death, for graduation, for driving license, everything online. If you want to transact with your bank, also online. If you want to sign a contract, so you are getting into a business deal with somebody, you just sign online, not scribble. You put in a PIN that is government PIN and you put it online. All that is what happens here in Estonia. So it's also among the countries with the most unicorns in the world. What's a unicorn? It's a company that is born from idea to become a global giant. I'll give you one of them that I'm sure you know very well. Bolt, the ride-hailing app, was born in Estonia, and several others. Now this morning, we are attending the Africa Business Forum, which is kicking off in Tallinn, and will be taking off place today and tomorrow. We'll be having several conversations. So we'll talk to the ambassador of Estonia to Kenya. We'll talk to Kenya's ICT secretary, who is also here. We will speak to some business persons who are running businesses in Estonia and in Nairobi, some students who are living and studying here, and we'll just be seeking to understand what is this like, what is this digitization, what is this startup ecosystem, what else is Estonia doing that we can borrow leaves from, how do we trade from Kenya to Estonia. For example, they love avocado and they buy avocados from Kenya. How do we bring more avocados here? How do we bring more agricultural products here? How do we start up our companies and come and register them here? Because you can do that. You can register a company in Estonia, operating in Kenya, but then registering it in Estonia gives you access to the European market. I'm taking a lot. See you at 8 a.m. where we'll have so many of these conversations all the way to 10 a.m. Again, Terra Amicus.
Tara Amkos, Eric, thank you for that Was Up Nation video. Can't wait for 8 a.m. Fix up our excellence. Yani sina maneno. I have no words. I can't wait for the conversation. I did not know that it's a country that has the most unicorns.
Wow.
I knew Bolt, of course, and a few other tech startups come from Estonia.
Yeah.
I did not know it has the most unicorns. And I think usually those are valued over $1 million? A billion. Oh my God.
Wow.
I was thinking Kenya shillings.
Dollars.
Yeah. I mean, hey, wait, $1 billion. Madness. Okay. 0769590762. That's our number. Send us your WhatsApp Nation video as well. 0769590762. Let us know who you are, where you are, and how you're fixing the nation. Eric amekuonyesha yake. Sindio? Let's get into our conversation with Robert Waruiru, who is breaking the 2026 finance bill down for us from a business perspective. And I know you wanted to get into
medium businesses. Yes. So shifting gears from small businesses, which form the bulk of what we call the informal sector. We had Ndindi Nyoro here about a week ago, and he told us that Kenya's economy is only 21% formalized, which is very interesting, because then the more formal your economy is, the more you'd be able to collect and actually track and trace the economic activities of your country. So not even getting to 30% is very telling, and ideally what Kerry is trying to do is to formalize the informal sector, which is, we can applaud them for that, but like I said, we also have to address the gaps that are there and do it the right way. That the goal is getting to 70% formalization of this economy, no problem. This is how we start roping in the informal sector and not make it as punitive as it is right now. Jumping on to medium businesses. So in this space, we have SMEs, we have retailers, we have importers, logistics companies, hospitality, and tech startups. So a number of tax proposals ideally that have been made for this is, one, the compressed tax filing deadlines. This puts a lot of pressure for these companies. Let's start from there.
Right. So the idea is, at least the proposal here is that we move from our filing deadline of 6 months after the year end. So if you're a December year end, your financial statements are made up to 31st December, then you've got until 6 months currently to file your tax return. What that does is that it gives you time to do your audits, to discuss with your auditors, find out what your balance of tax is, because that's due at the end of the 4th month. And there's a lot of time. There's a bit of runway for these businesses to ensure that they are doing the right thing. Now, the proposal is, let us bring that filing deadline to end of the 4th month, which means April. Yeah. Now, well, it's a good thing because it's probably going to get more accountants employed, because we now need to all finish these accounts. It's a very aggressive timeline, because if you think about it, financial institutions, meaning banks and insurance companies, have to publish by the end of March. So the focus is generally on those two institutions. Right. And then you've got listed entities which have to publish by the end of April. So you can see auditors are probably focused on these groups of companies which have got a statutory deadline. But then now you're bringing the whole of the rest of us. And by the way, that is for businesses that have got something to disclose. If you're not disclosing anything, meaning you're filing a nil return, then 31st of January is your due date.
Allah.
Yeah. Because what are you waiting for? That's the argument.
And let me ask, is the pay reconciliation date still April 30th? So we are squeezing in everything to fall within that period.
Correct. You have to file. So I think it's a very aggressive one, and it's going to be costly for businesses. And this is probably one where we need to do a phased approach, where we say, let us start with the big companies. Let's see how it works. And if you go to a country like Uganda, they have what is called provisional returns. So file your provisional return by the end of the 4th month. Then government can see or has visibility about your tax affairs. And then if there's anything that you need to rectify, you've got an additional 2 months, which means end of June. And probably that is the halfway house that we need to be thinking about as a country. But this provision, if it passes, it means that effective 2027, we all have to file our returns by April. Yes, it's because it's effective 1st January 2027, which means that the obligations that you have from that date, then you have to file. So if you're filing a new return, 31st of January. If you're filing any other return, meaning that you're declaring income,
by April 30th.
By April.
So that gives, I see the sense in that, where it allows this Kerry to do their reconciliations and to really look at how much it is they've been able to raise before the start of the next financial year, before the next finance bill and all of that. But it also, and I like that you've pointed to this, that it creates a lot of employment opportunities for tax auditors, accountants, and all of those firms that deal with this thing. But it also puts pressure on the businesses and you and me, which is, I mean, we win some, we lose some.
Agreed. And yes, so we win some and we lose some. But however, the reason why you see a lot of pushback on this is anyway, even under the current law, we still have an obligation to pay the taxes by 30th of April. So why are you moved? Because you see, Revenue Authority already has visibility of that tax by 30th of April. So why do you want us to now file by 30th of April? Yeah.
So the recommendations is to leave it as is.
Leave it as is. Or let's have a halfway house. Provisional return or a phased approach where we start with, let's say, we say the bigger guys, the bigger companies, the bigger businesses who can probably afford to do this. Let us see how it works and then we can roll it out to the rest of the 22.3 million taxpayers.
Okay. It's that's on matters tax filing deadlines. Let's look at VAT bad debt relief, which also falls for this. So that ideally, what is bad debt relief first of all?
So this is what happens. If I'm VAT registered, I will supply goods or services to you and charge you VAT. Then, for whatever reason, let's say you don't pay, and this outstanding debt remains there for 2, 3 years, 4 years. So the law says, because we recognize that you charged Wamboi VAT, she did not pay you, and this is not your tax. Remember, VAT is a consumption tax.
Yes.
So we recognize that you paid it yourself, Robert. So we are allowing you to claim a refund of that tax that you paid on that bad debt, because clearly she will not pay or he will not pay. So that's the idea here. And that's because for some of these businesses, you actually do recognize bad debts because of the state of the economy. So the current provision is, let us allow you to claim this bad debt within 2 years. And that changed actually in 2024. So that the period of 2 years was brought in 2024. Now, the proposal in the finance bill is, let's go back to 3 years, which was the previous position. And that's the point that you guys were discussing earlier on about tax stability, the policy. We're moving, this year is 2 years, next year is 3 years, then we change again. So it makes planning for businesses very difficult. But even more importantly, for these refunds, it means that you have to stay for an additional year before you can get your refund.
Your refunds?
Yes.
The instability of our tax policy, the mismatch that is just it's just shaping up. Let's talk about dividends and unclaimed. Is it unclaimed? Is that the word that we're using? But essentially saying that, yes, if you've not undeclared, that's the word I was looking for. Undeclared dividends can, up to 60% of your undeclared dividends can be taxed by the taxman. Essentially forcing you to do what government wants with your own money. You run a business, you make profits, you're able to give out a dividend. You want to hold on to something small for yourself for whatever reasons, capital, but the taxman says, nope, if you keep it, we can tax it. Walk me through the reasoning. Where else do they do this in the world as well?
Well, so you will hear proponents of this saying that OECD, which is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development of the EU, recommends that state corporations pay up to 80%. And I agree with that, because what are state corporations retaining their money for? After all, they are public companies, right? They should be giving back to the exchequer. However, for private businesses, I've got very many reasons why I don't want to distribute dividends, including that perhaps I have a loan that I need to retain some reserves for. I need a capital reserve fund for purposes of my new equipment. I need to expand my business. I don't want to borrow for my operations. So there are very many reasons why I wouldn't want to distribute dividends. And the current law as it is actually says the commissioner can force you to distribute. But then now you have a conversation. The commissioner will come and say, I want you to distribute, Robert, I want you to distribute 80%. I say, no, I can only distribute 5% because of 1, 2, 3 reasons. And we negotiate. Now, the proposal here is you must distribute 60%. So that's the starting point. And so the question we're asking is, so what is the role of the board of directors? What's the role of the shareholders in approving these distributions? Why are you forcing me to distribute, then go and borrow and incur more expenses?
It's madness. It's overreach.
And that's the reason why I disagree with that proposal, because let's leave it as it is. Every business has got its own needs and can determine how much it can distribute. You see, for example, banks, if you look at the banks generally distribute about 40%. Right now, especially the tier 2 and 3 banks, they're trying to run to increase their core capital to the 5 billion requirement.
Because there's new regulations that require higher core capital.
Exactly.
Yes.
So they will obviously retain
Hold
more.
back, yeah.
Yes. So now you're telling them you can't do that. Distribute.
So in this new provision, is it that you have to explain to the taxman why you're retaining and not declaring dividends, or is it mandatory that at least 60%?
At least 60%.
Oh, it's not a conversation.
Yeah, we start with 60%. Probably we'll take you to 80% if the conversation goes haywire. But yes, starting point is 60.
I want to know what informs some of these laws. Okay, I'm looking at what here could be smoke screens again, things that are just there to get people riled up, and then they get amended, and then the silent things that are likely to be impactful, especially to the taxman and to our pockets, that may slip up because we're looking at these big things. Because what I'm seeing is a likelihood of a lot of these very unpopular ones ending up being shelved or amended. But then there's always some things just go through very silently. In your professional opinion, what are those ones that they're very hard to see or hard to notice, but could be very impactful on our pockets?
I don't know whether there are any real smoke screens in that sense, because the ones that impact our pockets are the ones we've been talking about, VAT.
Yes.
The one that we are really concerned about is that one for paying before you can appeal.
Yeah,
that's a big one. Yeah, for businesses. Okay. There's some other smaller ones, like for example, changing the computation of number of days when you are appealing, because the current law is that you only count, like now I've seen tomorrow is a public holiday. Yeah, so you only count working days when you are computing the time within which you should appeal.
Right.
So they are proposing now to move back, and that again came in December 2024. So now they are proposing to move back to calendar days, so you include weekends and public holidays. So again, from a policy perspective, why this shift?
Okay, let me just ask, and I will ask this question to every person we have this conversation with: do we need a finance bill every year?
So
it's exhausting, Robert.
My
you can
view,
see how for our business, for even individuals, you can't predict anything.
Yeah, true. Actually, the national tax policy says you consider having a finance bill, but a stable tax policy, so that when you introduce a change, let it run for 3, 4, 5 years as you evaluate the impact. So to answer your question, we probably need a finance bill to amend points or things that we think have not worked over the last 3, 4, 5 years. But the current scenario where we have, like now this finance bill, by the way, it aims to collect about 135 billion. It's difficult to see where the 135 billion is coming from, other than from the VAT cuts. It's difficult to see that, because really there are no price increases, other than perhaps for mobile phones. So I don't believe we need a finance bill every year that increases the rates, but aligns the policy to reflect the needs of businesses, like you were saying, Wambui.
Just to Mariam's question, it's exhausting to every Kenyan business, and we look forward to a time where we'll have stable tax policies that don't shift with every year, with every cycle, because then we need some kind of stability. Economic stability is very important. I wanted to speak to Kenyans in the diaspora or investors who are looking to invest or who already have investments in the country. Now, I know this particular finance bill has something on non-resident rental income, and the withholding tax that's been applied to it. It's quite steep, 30%.
Well, and so this is the thing about these proposals. Even the Income Tax Act as it is still taxes these non-residents at 30%. So this is just, in my view, a cleanup, because a non-resident person who has got rental income in Kenya pays 30%. Yeah. So this is just anchoring it properly within the law, so that it's clear that you have that obligation. But anyway, even without that amendment, there was an obligation to pay 30% tax. And it stands to reason, because non-resident persons generally would pay tax on income derived from Kenya. Yeah, that's Kenya's tax system. So it's income accrued in or derived from Kenya.
Right.
Yeah.
You said that last year, KRA was able to collect an additional 8 billion Kenya shillings from about a tax base of 98,000 new.
This year, actually.
Oh, it's this year.
This year.
Okay, new taxpayers. Which sectors are these monies and taxpayers coming from? And then again, the question seems to be that we consistently squeeze the same group of people. It's corporates and people on payee that are just getting the life squeezed out of them. How do we widen the tax base without making it punitive, understanding that we're in a informal economy largely, that people live daily and their wages are often daily, but we still need to widen the tax base and take some pressure off? How do those two things coexist?
Yeah, so again, those 98,000 or so people are largely informal. And the point that had been made earlier about the Kenya's formal businesses being about 21%, it actually ties in because about 83% of this country's GDP is driven by SMEs, which are largely informal. That's where the informal employment comes in. So I think the idea should be, let's encourage these businesses, let's get them formalized so that they can bring in their POIEs, they can bring in their VATs and so on to the tax base. How do we do this? I think we need to encourage these smaller businesses and support them in their compliance journey. Because, for example, if you're talking about boda guys, so they make money every day, can we have a scenario where they pay taxes on a daily basis so that you're not having to collect at the end of the month when this guy has paid for his fuel, his service, his bike, and so on? So that we can enable them to comply with their obligations in a simpler way, so that you're paying as you go. Almost the same way that you don't pay POIE at the end of the year, because none of us would ever pay it if I was retaining my money. So I think that's the way to go about it in supporting that tax-based expansion, because I agree, currently about 7 million Kenyans are the ones who are paying taxes, and that includes businesses. And you'd be surprised, the large taxpayers are roughly 10,000 in this country. So the bulk of the taxes are paid by employees.
Correct.
As pay as you earn. And that's where the problem is.
It is essentially just trying to squeeze out water from a cactus. We've milked and milked until we can't milk anymore. What is the one provision in this bill that you'd remove and one that you'd keep, or even one that you'd include? That, maybe you're just like, this is a missed opportunity since we are talking about innovation.
I like those three, actually. Take one out.
Keep one,
add one.
So keeping one definitely is the one for the amnesty. I think that's a good one. Include one or add one would be that one for POIE, because that relief is important for employees. And I'm not just talking about the 30,000. I'm talking about bringing the employee POIE rate to 30% from 35%. That will
so maximum
to 30%.
To 30%, as it was just a year ago. Wait,
3 years ago.
2 years ago.
3.
It was 3.
Yeah.
So it even time flies.
2023.
It was 2023.
Yes.
Time flies. Okay. So that maximum, but then also to have it graduating.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So we're not starting at 30 across the board.
No.
Yes.
Actually, in fact, have it graduate a bit more, because right now, you get to 30% at 33,000.
Yes.
I mean, that's too low. So we probably need lower rates of 10, 15, 20, 25, 27 and a half maybe, and 30%, so that we can spread that burden evenly.
Yes.
So that's the one that I would include. Then the one that I would for sure remove in this bill would be that one for paying before you appeal, what we call pay to play. Yeah.
Hey, we've got a lot of red flags, a few green ones. Can I ask, just as we look at our medium-term revenue strategy, how this finance bill fits into it? Just talk about the things that you see that are consistent with our tax revenue strategy in the medium term, and the things that are inconsistent as we wrap up the conversation.
I think it's more, there are more inconsistencies because, for example, and not just this finance bill, but across the medium-term revenue strategy framework, which is 2024, 25 to 26, 27, 3 years. So we've been talking about VAT coming down to 14%. It's not come down. We've been talking about POE coming down, being rationalized. It's not come down. Corporation tax coming down. It's not been come down. However, let's give government their flowers.
Okay.
They have resolved the taxation of pensions. And even in this bill, by the way, there's a proposal to exempt pension benefits that are paid upon death. I think that's a good point. That's a good proposal.
Actually, walk us through that, because Yeah, just walk us through that. I did not quite understand it. Unajua unaweza soma kitu na haujaelewa.
So let's say, God forbid, that somebody passes on and their pension plan has got some amounts due to them, and therefore it will be paid to the estate. So those payments are now going to be exempt from tax, which is a good thing, because then you're giving this bereaved family a bunch of money which they can do something with. That, I think that's a good thing.
Okay.
And that is actually a part of the medium-term revenue strategy, the proposals to align the taxation of pensions. So that's a good thing.
Okay.
I think another good one is the gratuity element, clarifying the taxation of gratuity. We don't agree with some of the proposals. Like, for example, why should I have to work for 3 years? I can actually have a contract for 1 year, like in the NGO sector.
Yeah.
They have contracts for 1 year.
Yeah.
Then you paid your gratuity. So those are some of the things. I would say this bill and the last ones haven't really answered the call of the medium-term revenue strategy. And hopefully in the next cycle, we'll have that response.
Pay corporate tax and VAT. All to come down. Well, that was the medium-term revenue strategy.
The
Okay,
vision, yes.
Thank you so much. That is FCPA Robert Waruiru, who is also our Kili. You wear many hats. You wear very many hats. Thank you for spending the hour with us.
Thank you very much.
We have to end the hour there, but when we come back, Eric Latif will be live from Estonia, Tallinn, the capital city there, speaking to our ambassadors about what our relations look like and why Estonia is such a tech hub, what we could learn from them and what they could learn from us.